Hey, what's up, everyone? It's JJ, Devil's Joint. What we're gonna be doing today is watching the Alexander Mogilny story, Defector. This is one of the best hockey documentaries that's ever been made. It's an amazing story about how Alexander Mogilny was brought to Buffalo to play in the NHL, and escaped the, communist, the Soviet Union at the time. So this, like I said, the story is pretty creepy, pretty crazy. I mean, if you guys don't know this story, I'm really glad to be here to play it for you. So I'm going to rewind. I left it on this because this is, that's the beginning of it. But let's start it up here. All right.
25 years ago, two men embarked on a thrilling and potentially treacherous adventure that would change the face of hockey. The first man was Don Luce, the Buffalo Sabres Director of Player Development, and the second man was me. My name is Jerry Meehan, and in 1989, I was the general manager of the Buffalo Sabres when I directed and participated in the defection of Alexander Mogilny from the Soviet Union to the United States.
Good for you.
Do you remember when Alex Mogilny went to Buffalo at the end of the tournament?
Now, Sergei Fedorov,
Yes, of course.
not a
Can you tell me
nice
a little
guy,
bit about that?
in my opinion.
No.
In this situation, Mogilny was the number one guy. Bure, Fedorov, Mogilny was the number one guy in Russia at the time.
1989 was a time of great political change.
Jeremy.
The Iron Curtain was showing signs of weakness.
The wall had not come down. Things were still pretty dicey at that time.
All these politicians were speaking about
Yes, I got a
democracy
devil's
and so
joint.
on. And nobody was serious about economy, and the economy was in terrible situation.
Soviet Union was about to crumble, but on the ice it was business as usual. The Big Red Machine captured nearly every world championship and Olympic gold from 1963 to 1989. The
Unbelievable.
late Viktor Tikhonov was the head coach of the Red Army and Soviet national teams.
You gotta
and
respect
was
him.
known for his dictatorial coaching style.
We trained 11
Maybe
months
not the
out of
Soviet
12,
Union, but their hockey
especially the young
team
guys.
and these
It
guys.
was a very hard system that you gotta go through. A lot of people came in, but not many survived.
Siva
Kasatonov.
Kukushkin was a journalist, part-time translator, and a full-time confidant of Tikhonov.
What is better, to be a little bit dictator and to get result, or to have wild democracy?
I was fight for my
What is
rights.
better? That's
I
a
was
good
fight
question.
For the freedom, democracy.
Sometimes you have nightmares. That kind of work really take a lot out of you.
At that time, the Soviet presence in the NHL was minimal. Legends who were thought to be past their prime would soon
And
be
so
on
far,
their
New
way.
Jersey was one of the only teams
All
that,
players,
and was the
they
first
knew
team to
that
bring
they
these
are
guys in.
as good as NHL stars, and some of them a little bit better.
Yeah.
The Soviets were
We learned that
confident
very
they
quickly.
had a group of young phenoms waiting in the wings.
I'll show you the.
Mogilny to Fedorov. Fedorov back to Mogilny. Scores!
Alexander Mogilny was their prized jewel. The hockey world took notice in 1988.
All right,
His
so
draft year.
1988, the hockey world took notice of the prize jewel, Alexander Mogilny. I'm actually going to take this off the screen because I don't have the greatest lighting. Right here, you can see I have a Mogilny Russia jersey. I have a Mogilny Buffalo poster, original, from, the early 90s. This is a Toronto Mogilny McFarlane. And I have a mini Devils McFarlane, which just got crushed in the box it was in, but it's a mini New Jersey Devils. And if you could find one of those somewhere, let me know, because I have never seen anyone else have one of those.
Year.
In '88, I went over to Moscow for the World Junior Championships. Alex was playing at that time, and that's where we first saw him. He was a dominant player.
At that point, no hockey player had ever defected from the Soviet Union. I told some people that I thought he was probably the best player in the world in that draft that year.
Oh yeah, absolutely, no question about it. I think the biggest thing was that he was playing in Russia.
Now you gotta, if you're listening to this, you might never know that he was the number one guy. No, people don't realize that.
Mogilny, but don't think he's going to be picked by anybody in June.
At the draft table, I said, all right, we've got this second pick in the 5th round. What are we going to do with it? And everybody else was throwing a player at me and things, and I said, no, we're taking Mogilny. So I didn't view it as much of a gamble, but I think a lot of people thought it was a huge gamble.
Respect to Buffalo for that.
January 1989, I sent Don Luce to the World Junior Tournament in Anchorage, Alaska, to introduce himself to Mogilny.
Excellent move! He scores!
Oh, the wrist shot. The Mogilny wrister. If you know, you know. I have 2 sticks that he's used to score goals with that wrister right here in my room.
Business card and said,
Or this room, not in my room.
We drafted you. This is a team that, if you ever want to know anything about our organization or anything, just give us a call.
This young man, the most talked about performer here.
5 months later, Mogilny and the Soviets captured the 1989 World Championship. The very next day, Don received an unexpected phone call that would change the future of our organization.
This is crazy.
I got a call saying that Alex wanted to come out and come over and play in North America.
So you call me, I call Seymour Knox, the owner, and we agree that it's worth a flight to Stockholm to find out if this is the real thing.
Now he came out, he defected Russia through another country. Let's be clear about that. It was too dangerous to leave Russia. But
my secretary got a call from Craig Ramsey, who was with the Sabres at the time.
Soviet Union.
And he came in very excited and said, we got a problem. We need your help. And they were meeting with one of the players who was on the Red Army team and had made arrangements to bring back this Alex Mogilny. And it sounded very complex, and I said, look, I'm on my way out to a meeting, but because Craig was a neighbor of mine, lived down the street, I said, why don't you stop up tonight after 8 o'clock?
And now we're
that's his name spelled with the Y without the I.
Defector. Someone that wanted to get out and come over here.
It was one
A lot of respect for Craig Ramsey.
One I hadn't faced in the past, and one that I know Jerry and Don Luce hadn't faced in the past, and it was bigger than all of us realized.
Defector. His family was scared to be
May
killed.
3rd,
They
Don
could
and
have
I
been
landed
killed.
in Stockholm around 11 a.m.
Watch.
Our first priority was to set up a meeting with Mogilny. We had arranged to meet with him and his representatives that evening, but they arrived at our hotel unexpectedly and asked to see us then because apparently there was some kind of a team meeting for the Soviet national team. First things first, is this Alexander Mogilny? And I thought it was from the pictures, but I'd never seen him face to face. So Don says, no, that's Alex. Mogilny was with a man named Sergei Fomichov, who was acting as his translator and representative. And we were scheduled to meet them both again at an apartment later that evening. Sergei called and said they thought they had been identified and were being followed. And they didn't want to take a chance on leading us to the apartment, so they would meet us at this mall, which was about 5 minutes
So already Mogilny's like, planning this escape.
All of a sudden the door bursts open and Sergey and Alex
It's
come
May
running
3rd
out,
right
jump
now.
in the car, and then we take
That
off.
said May 3rd,
They
right?
had actually snatched him away from the Soviet team.
I knew that we were into something that we really had to be concerned about.
Yeah.
We started making plans to get to a different hotel and start negotiating about coming to North America.
I knew that wasn't going to go over well with the Soviets. In fact, Jerry admitted he felt he was being followed by the Soviets.
This is basically the point of no return.
Of course you
You've
are.
done it now.
KGB.
You made your decision. You can still go back, I think. You knew a little bit of English. No, I go.
I go. Love him. My favorite player of all time.
Alexander and Sergei were crossed. I kept detailed notes while I was in Sweden because I knew I would have to answer for my actions. Aside from a few colleagues, these notes have never been seen. I said we must go to the U.S. Embassy to make arrangements for the appropriate travel documents. Our next stop was the U.S. Embassy. Don dropped me off that night to get started on the paperwork. We knew darn well that U.S. embassies are watched by people who might have contrary interests. Ben Farrow had stated on the phone he would talk to the State Department in Washington, D.C. to get direction.
We did have the embassy in Stockholm working with us and with headquarters to get a piece of paper, a document that gave them permission to board with Mogilny on the plane.
The paperwork was filed and we were told to return to the U.S. Embassy in 24 hours. Or thereabouts to...
They just want to get on the
travel
plane and
document,
be in the air.
which we weren't certain we were going to get, because there still had to be a preliminary determination that he was in fact eligible to be considered a refugee or an asylee. I left the car and instructed Don Luce to drive around the area but not stop at
Today, you
or
could
near
just
the
go
embassy.
through the southern
I would meet
border,
them at a
come right in,
prearranged
no
spot.
problem.
I drove Alex around, and he wanted to call his parents.
Not for much
No,
longer.
he'd been cut off. The phone had been cut off, and he wanted to call back. And so he went in, and the operator, I guess, got the number back again. But he said this time an operator came on, and it was different from the operator before.
It was
in
KGB.
Russia. And he came out and he said, I think they know where we are.
By this time, we had some fear that Soviets may suspect Alex's jump and be watching the embassy.
They didn't,
Jerry
no
came
one
back
was
to
allowed to
Boston
leave
and
the
said
Soviet
that
Union.
Things are in the works, but he's going to have to go back, I believe, the next day. He said that our lives were in danger because no hockey player had defected from Russia before.
There's no doubt that someone might be listening to the phone calls. There were international phone calls.
Well, one of the phone calls in Ben's office, and Jerry said Alex is interested. Alex is getting ready to come out. But Ben's eyes lit up, and he looked at me, shook his head. No. So after Jerry hung up, he said, "You've got to make sure the next time you talk to Jerry, he knows no more names, or Donnie, no more names. We know who they're talking about. Those guys you see on television with the long jackets, they're real. They're listening. And if they happen to pick up on that name and can reference it to Alexander Mogilny, they're going to come looking."
They'll stop you
like a
at
James
all
Bond type
costs.
person at times because you're driving around.
They don't want him to
countries
go
you don't know
to
very
America and
well.
tell everyone what's going
You
on
always
over
think that
there.
Somebody's looking at
That's
you
their
or
fear
looking
at
for
at
you
that
or
time.
trying to find you, and
From
we
what I
didn't want
believe,
them to know
or
where
no.
we were, so we kept switching hotels. You had to hide out.
The travels around the countryside, the secret hotel rooms, it was like a spy novel.
Yes.
Checked into the Hotel Prince Philip at 12:30. It was not too late for him to reconsider and return to the Soviet
The
team in time for
Hotel
the morning
Prince
departure
Philip.
for Moscow.
There were people looking for him. They kept making announcements on
What about that
the
Hotel Prince Andrew?
And they were asking everybody, where he was, if he was in the hotel. And it was clear that this was a major confrontation.
These are events of first impression. You don't really plan them.
For the team members or the monitors, mentors that the Russians always had with their Red Army team, if they found him, they would physically grab him and return him. I don't know what they might have done with Jerry and Don Luce, but I just knew
They would have went to prison, I'm pretty sure.
We were staying out of sight because the consequences of being discovered by the Swedish authorities or even, security on the other side could have been dire.
That's fucking terrifying.
There was a lot of speculations. Has he been offered a contract, or
You
has
guys
he
really
been
went the extra
murdered
mile
or
to get their
killed?
player.
There was some accusation floating around that we kidnapped him.
What if somebody comes to the door, or what if they find the
At least
car,
our
or they know
Devils
where
were
we
able
are?
to
Did
give
you know
him
Alex
Stanley
wanted
Cup.
to leave?
Right before, we talked about a couple of times.
Fedorov may have
He
a
said,
few,
"No, I
but
still
Beret don't
go."
have any.
He asked me to go. I'm like, I'm not sure.
How did the team react to that?
Not very well. That I can say. When Alex left, it's been a few meetings with.
They were very
certain officials.
indoctrinated. Very, very indoctrinated.
All Soviet players on the 1989 World Championship team were questioned by Soviet
Except
authorities
Mogilny,
after
who was
Mogilny's defection.
thinking for himself.
Young player, young brain, And he was born in Siberia, in Khabarovsk, it's far east. And it's easy to tell him, oh, you have a great future. Yes, he had great future. But he decided to live this way.
Mogilny's status in the Army complicated matters further.
He was an officer in the Red Army, playing on the Red Army team. And as such, he would have been seen as we would see any officer in the Army defecting or deserting. That was serious.
He left Army. He was a ranked lieutenant, and it was not good. You're involved in this
Ranked lieutenant, Mr. Mogilny was.
Sneaking out of Russia to come and play hockey for the Buffalo Sabres.
A defection that is far from resolved.
We certainly didn't want to hang around anywhere where there'd be any media. We got to get a travel document, get him signed to or at least
still
agree
stuck
to
in
a
Europe.
contract, and plane reservations back to the United States, all in about 24 to 36 hours. The Soviet team left for Moscow, minus Mogilny. Alexander insisted that we call his team hotel to leave a message that he was staying. Alexander insisted that the Soviet embassy be notified. Shortly after, we received a call that our travel documents were ready.
They were pissed because he was their best player.
US Embassy. We booked the first flight available to New York.
I mean, obviously they were
The scariest part was when
indoctrinated into their communism as well.
Seeing things that maybe aren't there. I don't know. You think maybe a car's not supposed to be there, or you start looking for things.
Once he left the hotel in Stockholm, there was a point of no return.
We get to the airport real early, and we're on the first flight out of Stockholm for New York City. I go through first. I have no trouble getting through. Alex came next, which was the nervous part, because one of the reasons why we wanted to get out of town fast was the concern that because the Soviet team had already left for Moscow, that there would be an alarm set up for his whereabouts.
Yep.
Whether it be by the local police or whatever security people they might have had. So we had to get through there.
KGB everywhere.
And then Don came through last. We got through without any incident.
Once we were through, I recall them picking up a Swedish newspaper, and they were listing our names, and they had some of the hotels that we had stayed at.
Devil's Joint.
Somebody was doing something to know where we had been.
I don't know how that ever got out, because we weren't even on the plane yet.
You had a high-powered intelligence
speculation
watching you guys. That's why.
We were leaving with Mogilny to go to the United States. I know for a fact that if it had been one more day, we wouldn't got out of the country.
Wheels up. When that plane took off was the first time they could breathe that they were on their way, because I think had the Soviets known he was going to get on that plane, they would have stopped him.
Yeah, of course
The
they would.
flight home was quiet and uneventful. But when we landed in New York, we realized the story had been leaked.
Mm-hmm. At least they were in New York at the time. I mean, now if it was New York, they might get arrested because it's New York.
We've never had this many
You're not allowed to breathe in New York.
in the airport before, and they know about what's going on.
Well, actually, if you're a criminal, you're allowed to kill people and rob everyone. But if you say the wrong thing, you get arrested.
Is he still in the city, or is he going outside? No comment about that.
When we landed JFK, they had a big press conference there, and I believe at the time it was the most reporters ever at JFK Airport when Jerry met the press there.
Alexander Mogilny is in the country.
Alexander Mogilny, Defector. I love this jersey. I should have put it on.
We arrived a few minutes ago in New York City, and Alexander Mogilny is in the country.
Alexander Mogilny is in the country.
This wasn't about the Buffalo Sabres and getting a hockey player. This was a world event.
Alexander Mogilny met for over an hour and a half with immigration officials in the
I wish I was old enough to be able to be watching this stuff live.
The arrival of Alexander Mogilny was an addition they certainly
Hockey
hadn't
star
anticipated.
Alexander Mogilny has yet
This
to
is
make
the
a public
latest
appearance.
tool For Buffalo sportscasters,
Man, they really got one picture of him, huh?
English dictionary.
I've heard that they write that I think only about myself.
Listen to this.
Who was thinking about me when I finished playing hockey in the Soviet Union?
Once we were in Buffalo,
Genius.
we wanted to keep
Love
McGillney's
him.
whereabouts private.
Got
It
balls.
was best for McGillney to live with Don
Nice,
and his wife.
great guy
Diane.
too. Nicest guy in the world.
A gentleman came to the door one day, and he'd been asking questions at the local grocery store. You know, he said, "Alex is here, and I'd like to talk to him." And he had a Russian accent.
Alex.
That's the jersey.
KGB.
I'm gonna pause for 1 second.
English to me and
The first time I ever knew of Mogilny was playing street hockey at a park that was behind my, I don't know why I'm pointing, behind my elementary school. And one of the older kids that, went to middle school had that Buffalo jersey with number 89 Mogilny. And I was like, I like that jersey, I like that name. And so he became my favorite player at that moment. That's when I got that poster, and I still have it to this day. I have a lot of other Mogilny stuff too.
And then he said something in Russian, and
Let's go back a little.
Accent.
Alex thought it might be KGB. He
Yeah, 'cause
spoke
he's
English
smart.
to me, and then he said something in Russian, and then I came into Alex and said, "Someone wants to see you," and he said, "Nit."
Nit.
I do not want to talk to them.
Why would he show up here? Like nobody else knew he was here. Kind of got the feeling that maybe somebody was doing something.
The next issue we faced was making sure McGillney could stay in the country.
We're here this afternoon to announce that Alexander Mogilny has filed a petition for political asylum.
He came over as a humanitarian parolee, and that was a 6-month time frame. And once he arrived, we started to work on the asylum application, which was more rigorous, took more time, required an affidavit to be filed. It provided background information about who he was, and more importantly, what the
Now remember,
consequences would be
anyone
for him
who's
if he
questioning,
attempted
and
to
I'm
return
not going to get political here. Anyone who's questioning, oh well, this guy's just playing hockey. Why could why does he get to just come in? When people are waiting. Well, I think the only people who would ask questions like that are people who don't care about what's going on at our border right now. But that's irrelevant. He is an asset to America. When this man comes to America, he will be making a lot of money. He will help the American economy. So he is an asset to America immediately. The end.
Those consequences would be
7 years hard labor, which in essence meant a death sentence.
Soviet military officials.
You heard that?
The consequences would be for him if he attempted to return to the Soviet Union.
If he went back,
7 years hard labor, which in essence meant a death sentence.
Soviet military officials announced the 20-year-old Army lieutenant had been charged with desertion.
Well, they had to do that. It couldn't be any other way.
Look at that
Obviously,
sweater.
he's got courage.
He's got some marbles.
His long-term future in the U.S. was still in doubt, and we needed something. We looked to our owner, the late Seymour Knox III, who took it to the highest levels of the U.S. government.
As this thing dragged on, I knew that they were digging deep.
This Mogilny
to
story
try
went to the
figure out
government.
Who can we contact? Who knows who?
My dad had a great relationship with President Bush. He and President Bush had gone to college together at Yale. President Bush had been in a number of different roles, head of the CIA for a little while. He was head of
Vice president. Just feel little things.
He had all the connections. He knew all the people.
He's also a psychopath.
At that moment in time.
Ronald Reagan.
About what to do and what were the steps that you needed to go through to be able to bring a defector into America.
George Bush found the incident compelling. He felt sympathy for Alex, who wanted to be in a different situation.
It took several months, but finally Alex McGillney was granted asylum in the United States.
You psycho
If
nut.
that phone call to George Bush had not been made, if he had not gotten asylum, then presumably he would have been deported.
Bad people do good things sometimes.
And I said, yes, you're free.
You're free.
Imagine yourself, a 20-year-old athlete, making the decision to leave your home and family and seek your personal and athletic freedom in the United States. An act of courage and determination that would set the stage for many other elite Russian athletes to follow.
Woo! Look at this guy. LaFontaine. Alexander Mogilny scored 1,032 points in 990 NHL games. Now, he could have, the Devils sent him down to Albany. He played 990 games. They couldn't have let him play 10 more games. I don't believe he was injured. He was sent down to Albany and then he retired. So he did retire a New Jersey Devil. But why not let him play 1,000 games? He's obviously more than a point per game player, which is you know, a feat in itself.
I just had a sense of
not in the Hockey Hall of Fame. This guy. Look at this story. Fedorov don't have this story. Bure with no Stanley Cups doesn't have this story.
This was, in all respects, the right thing to do at that time.
Mogilny has returned to Russia and is currently the general manager of Vladivostok. Well, I don't believe he is in the KHL anymore. He was working with the Florida Everblades down in South Florida. I met him down there in 2000. I don't remember, sometime over a decade ago.
Union, the wall falling down. Tremendous historical time, and that was part of it.
Could not be reached for comment. KGB got him again.
Sometimes these things happen for a reason.
They're time machines.
In fact, that they're meant to be.
Several months later, when I was reassigned to director in Rome, Italy, I had the privilege of accompanying the Attorney General to Moscow. One of the Soviet members of their delegation come up to me while I was still sitting at the table and asked me to convey his best wishes to Alex Mogilny.
Fact.
How does he know?
Fact.
They do their homework, I'm sure.
Don't know when you said that, Andy. I just noticed it now, but yeah, so that's Defector, the Alexander Mogilny story. I guess, do I want to do this? Yeah, you know, Alexander Mogilny is, like I said, not in the Hall of Fame, not in the Hockey Hall of Fame.
Of hockey. The first man was Don Luce.
Yeah, okay.
My name is Jerry. Directed and participated.
Here we go.
Of course.
Can you tell me a little bit?
Fuck Sergei Fedorov. There we go. Okay. So, Mogilny is not in the Hockey Hall of Fame. If you just watch this, the guy won a Stanley Cup, okay? He was over a point per game player. He was instrumental in the Devils' 2000 Stanley Cup and going to Game 7 of the 2001 Stanley Cup Finals for the Devils. He was great in Vancouver. He was great in Buffalo. He was great in Toronto. Injuries aside. Mogilny is for some reason I'm guaranteed it's some political. I'm not saying like, you know, our government political, but hockey politics. Some sort of hockey politics is behind why he's not being voted in, or he's not even a nominee for the Hockey Hall of Fame. You know, he's definitely in before Bure, and to me, yes, it's definitely rigged, Andy. I mean, without question. I mean, how do you put Pavel Bure in the Hockey Hall of Fame before this guy, unless there's some sort of deal where they're like, you know, you're not allowed to give him any credentials or awards beyond what he earned himself, like the Stanley Cup or whatnot, because we didn't come in over and take him back or whatever. Who knows? It's some sort of politics, hockey politics. It could be a little bit of world politics also at the time, but irrelevant. The point is, this is the number one guy, came from Russia, then Fedorov, and then Bure. You know what I mean? And how is he not even a nominee sometimes? Oh, well, maybe he was nominated to be in the Hockey Hall of Fame, to be inducted, but he wasn't picked this year. But he's not even there. He's not even talked about. They're picking guys who retired 2 years ago for the Hockey Hall of Fame. And Alexander Mogilny, if you saw this story, this man risked his life to come play for the Buffalo Sabres in the NHL. And that's really all I gotta say. Andy, thank you for commenting. Everyone on Rumble, if you're watching on Rumble, oh, you are watching on Rumble. Thank you for watching. And whoever's watching on X, I see 31. I don't know where the 31 is. I think that might be X. I'm not sure. But thank you for watching there as well. Andy, if you don't follow me on X, it's the same handle as this, at Devil's Joint X. So thanks for watching. Andy, it's good to see you. And I'll talk to you soon. Coming back with Playing to Lose, the documentary about how the Pittsburgh Penguins stole Mario Lemieux from the New Jersey Devils. See you next.